Hello.
Jacob, an exhausted single father, felt like every day was like the last in an endless struggle for survival. His son Tommy was born with a rare disease that limited his mobility and required constant medical care. The wheelchair the boy used was old and uncomfortable, which only added to the difficulties of their already difficult life. That day, Jacob came to the hospital for another consultation. He was hoping to get some help or at least some advice on how to find the money for a new wheelchair for Tommy. The hospital corridors, filled with ringing phones and footsteps of medical staff, seemed even colder than usual. Jacob stood in line, holding an old folder with documents and prescription papers he had diligently collected over the years. Jacob's situation was complicated. After his wife's death, he had quit his job to take care of his son and was now struggling to make ends meet. Government support was minimal, and the organizations he turned to could not cover the cost of a special wheelchair. Every day was a struggle for him, but Jacob never showed his fatigue to his son. Tommy always saw him as a source of strength and hope. While waiting for his appointment, Jacob felt his legs go numb from standing for a long time. He looked around and noticed a man sitting in the corner of the room, holding a hat in his hands and looking at it as if lost in thought. He looked familiar, but Jacob didn't pay much attention. He was too focused on his problems. When it was finally his turn, Jacob walked into the doctor's office, hoping to hear something reassuring. The doctor looked over the paperwork and, as usual, expressed his sympathy, but offered nothing concrete. Leaving the office, Jacob felt even more depressed. He realized that without help, the situation would not change. On his way back to the waiting area, Jacob saw the same man again. This time he stood up and discussed something with the nurse. He looked ordinary, wearing plain clothes with no signs of luxury or status. But his mannerisms and calm confidence in his movements were eye-catching. Jacob thought that maybe he was one of the philanthropists who sometimes visited the hospitals. On his way out of the hospital, Jacob stopped at the reception desk to check the schedule for his next appointment. The nurse working at the desk suddenly noticed him and told him to wait. He was surprised, but decided to stay. A few minutes later, the man he had seen earlier came to the counter and said something briefly to the nurse. She nodded and handed Jacob an envelope. It contained a confirmation of the order for a new wheelchair for Tommy, a state-of-the-art one with all the necessary features for comfortable movement. Jacob felt his heart swell with surprise and relief. He could not believe his eyes. He looked up and saw the man walk out of the hospital and disappear into the crowd. Jacob didn't know who he was, but his gesture changed everything. It wasn't just help. It was a ray of hope in a darkness that seemed endless. The next morning, Jacob woke up with a strange sense of relief that he hadn't felt in months. Still in disbelief that what had happened was real, he looked over and over the documents that the hospital had given him. They stated that a wheelchair of the highest quality had been ordered and paid for in full. It was a real miracle for him. Tommy, his son, didn't know about it yet, but Jacob could already imagine how their lives would change. Throughout the day, Jacob tried to focus on his daily routine, but thoughts of the man who had made the gesture kept him busy. Who was he? Why did he decide to help them? There were no answers, but Jacob felt deeply grateful. That same day, he decided to write a letter to the hospital expressing his gratitude. He hoped that this letter would find the person behind this miracle. When the day of the wheelchair delivery came, it became a small celebration for the whole family. Tommy, who has always been cheerful despite his difficulties, was beaming with happiness. The new wheelchair was not only comfortable, but also allowed the boy to move around much easier. It had special settings that took into account his needs, and even additional functions that allowed him to control the movement on his own. Jacob watched his son with pride and relief. He felt that this was not just a gift, but a chance for a new life for his family. Thanks to this gesture, he could focus on other aspects of caring for Tommy without worrying every day about how their old wheelchair was affecting his son. A few weeks after the wheelchair was delivered, Jacob received a call from the hospital. The voice on the other end of the line introduced himself as an administrator and said that the organization that sponsored the wheelchair wanted to remain anonymous, but recommended that Jacob attend a charity event that was coming up soon. The administrator said that it might be beneficial for him and his son. Jacob couldn't agree more. He felt that this event could be another chance to understand who was behind the help. On the day of the event, he and Tommy went to a large hall where many people had already gathered. Among the guests were volunteers, doctors, families who had received support, and sponsors who helped fund the various programs. As Jacob entered the hall, his attention was immediately drawn to a man in simple but elegant clothes standing near the stage. His face looked familiar, but Jacob couldn't place where he had seen him before. The man seemed to be avoiding unnecessary attention, but his presence was palpable. Tommy, sitting in his new wheelchair, also noticed the man. It seemed to Jacob that this event had not only a charitable, but also a personal purpose for someone present, and he began to suspect that this person might be the one who changed their lives. The charity event, which was organized in a large ballroom, turned out to be a grand affair. Jacob, feeling excited, held Tommy's shoulders as they slowly moved between tables, greeting volunteers and other parents. The atmosphere in the room was warm and filled with joy and gratitude. The lights of the chandeliers reflected in the glass walls gave the room a sense of grandeur. Various speakers took the stage from time to time. Representatives of charitable organizations, doctors who worked with children with disabilities, and families themselves to tell their stories. Jacob listened attentively, feeling his appreciation for those who devote their lives to helping others grow. In the crowd, Jacob spotted the same man he had seen in the hospital. Now he was sure it was the man who had helped them with the wheelchair. The man stood in the corner of the room, watching the events, as if trying to remain invisible. His simple but elegant appearance stood out among the other guests. Jacob was hesitant to approach him, but Tommy saw the man and smiled and nodded in his direction. Jacob made up his mind. He slowly approached the man, feeling a mixture of anxiety and gratitude. The man turned his head and smiled at Jacob, and he smiled kindly. His calmness and kindness immediately dispelled all of Jacob's doubts. The man introduced himself, and Jacob realized he was standing in front of Keanu Reeves. The news was overwhelming. Jacob couldn't believe that a famous actor could make such a gesture for them without trying to draw attention to himself. Keanu explained that he has long been concerned about the problems faced by parents of children with disabilities, and he is always looking for ways to help, while remaining in the shadows. Keanu said that in the hospital he was touched by the story of Jacob and Tommy. He saw in Jacob a real hero father who did not give up despite all the difficulties. That is why he decided to act without waiting for gratitude or publicity. His words were simple but sincere, and Jacob felt that he was meeting a man with a big heart. During the event, the host announced that he wanted to invite a special guest to the stage who had made a significant contribution to supporting families with children with disabilities. Jacob realized that it was Keanu. At first, the actor tried to refuse, but the guests insisted. Keanu went on stage to applause. His speech was short but emotional. He emphasized the importance of joint support, saying that every family facing such difficulties deserves help and humanity. His words inspired many, and Jacob felt proud to know this man. After the event, Jacob and Tommy had the opportunity to talk to Keanu again. The actor offered to help them not only with Tommy's treatment, but also with finding special support programs for single parents. He shared contacts of organizations that could provide additional assistance and promised to support them in the future. This meeting changed not only Jacob and Tommy's lives, but also left a mark on the hearts of everyone who attended the event. For many, it was a reminder that even one good deed can change the world. When Jacob returned home from the charity event, he couldn't stop thinking about Keanu's words. His simplicity, humanity, and desire to help left a deep mark on Jacob's heart. He realized that their meeting was not just a coincidence, but a sign that there are people in the world who are ready to support even strangers. The following weeks were full of changes. Tommy, with his new wheelchair, began to attend classes that were previously inaccessible to him. His mobility allowed him to participate in school activities and spend more time with his friends. Jacob saw his son blossom, becoming more confident and joyful. For Jacob, it was the greatest gift to see Tommy enjoy his childhood. Keanu didn't stop at just helping with the wheelchair. He organized consultations for Jacob and Tommy with specialists who helped to adapt their home to the boys' needs. In addition, Keanu recommended a program for single parents that not only provided support, but also gave them the opportunity to share experiences with other families. The meeting with Keanu and their story gradually gained publicity. It was hard for Jacob to get used to the attention they were receiving, but he realized how important it was. People began to learn about the difficulties faced by parents of children with disabilities. The media published articles, and charitable organizations used the story to call for more support for these families. One such article caught the attention of a local businessman who decided to do his part. He offered Jacob a job with flexible hours that would allow him to take care of Tommy and provide a steady income at the same time. This was a great relief for Jacob, as he could now not only take care of his son, but also plan for the future. Meanwhile, Tommy started participating in local sports competitions for children with disabilities. The new wheelchair allowed him to showcase his abilities and enjoy the competition. He received his first medal at a table tennis competition, which was further proof of his strength and perseverance. Jacob was proud to watch his son reach new heights. Despite all the changes, Jacob and Tommy tried to remain as humble as ever. Their lives began to take on the stability they had been missing. Every day, Jacob was thankful that he had crossed paths with Keanu Reeves. He knew that without his help they would not have been able to achieve what they have now. Tommy often asked his father about Keanu, and Jacob was happy to tell him about the man who helped them in their most difficult moment. They stayed in touch, occasionally receiving letters or short calls from Keanu asking how they were doing. Jacob decided that the best way to repay the help he had received was to support others. He began volunteering with a local charity, helping families with children with disabilities. His experience and story have become a source of inspiration for many. He talked about how one good deed can change a life. This part of his life was not only about gratitude, but also about a sense of duty. Jacob realized that now he had a chance to become someone who would support others in difficult moments, just as he had been supported. The months that followed the charity event and the help from Keanu Reeves were a time of change and new opportunities for Jacob and Tommy. They were able to rethink their lives, find balance, and regain hope for the future. Keanu's help not only provided them with material resources, but also triggered a chain reaction of support from the community. Thanks to his new wheelchair, Tommy no longer felt limited. Now he could move around independently and even help his father with small household chores. Their home was a warm atmosphere filled with laughter and joy. For the first time in a long time, Jacob began to allow himself to dream about the future. Every evening, he and Tommy spent time together discussing their plans for the future. Tommy dreamed of becoming a programmer and developing games that would be accessible to people with physical disabilities. Jacob supported him and even began to learn the basics of programming to help his son understand the more complex aspects. Jacob decided to dedicate some of his time to charity work. He started working with local organizations to help other parents in similar circumstances. His story became a source of inspiration, and many people came to him for advice. One day, he was approached by a woman named Sarah, who was raising 2 children alone and struggling financially. Her youngest daughter needed special equipment for rehabilitation, but Sarah didn't know where to find support. Jacob decided to take action. Using the contacts he had made through Keanu and other charity events, he helped Sarah find sponsors. Seeing how his actions were benefiting others made Jacob feel like his life had taken on a new meaning. He realized that he was now part of a larger movement, a community of people changing the world with kindness. One day, Jacob received an unexpected call. It was Keanu Reeves. He was wondering how Jacob and Tommy were doing and asked to meet up. Jacob was excited about this news because he wanted to show them in person how much their lives had changed thanks to his help. When they met in a small cafe, Tommy immediately ran to hug Keanu. Their conversation was easy and sincere. Jacob shared his successes, talked about volunteering, and the help he now provides to others. Keanu was happy to hear that his act was the impetus for so many changes. Keanu decided to share Jacob and Tommy's story through his platforms, encouraging more people to get involved in helping others. He noted that a small gesture can start a chain of goodness that will change the lives of many. Jacob's story was an example of how the kindness of one person can inspire an entire community. It showed that change starts with each of us, and even the smallest contribution can be crucial for someone. Jacob and Tommy's lives became calmer, but full of new opportunities. Tommy continued to realize his dreams by developing his programming skills. Jacob found his calling in helping others and continued to work to ensure that their story inspires people around the world. But their story was not over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter where kindness and compassion became the foundation for creating a better world. And every time Jacob looked at his son, he knew that they would overcome any difficulties because now they had the most important thing: hope and support.
Goodbye.